And then this is like my GitHub. So if you want to get in contact with me, this can get you to my Twitter, where you can actually like message me if you are interested. Always welcome to talk to anyone about any of these kind of things. I kind of see my role as being a connector between these projects and the people actually using them. And so it's always good to kind of like just get to hop on a call with someone and talk about this kind of thing, because these projects are like large and complicated, but once you kind of wrap your mind around them, they're actually like really cool. And there's a massive like team of people kind of working on it. So I am a developer advocate at StepZen, which is a company that builds managed GraphQL API gateways, which is kind of the most succinct definition I can find for it, but we'll get into that too much. I'm also on the RedwoodJS core team, and I am kind of like the core developer advocate for the team. So I do things like this, where I go out and kind of communicate what the project is and explain it to people. And this is the script that I'm going to be going off of. So what I would do for all these talks is I create a repo with a script where I kind of build out the project, and then I build it out a second time for the actual talk, because this ensures that I don't mess it up, and also helps me like run through it one time. So this is the first command that I already ran over here, because it takes a little while. Not as long as it used to, though, because I have a nice sweet M1 now. So if you check the version number right here, we're on Redwood.26.2, and the last couple releases have had a lot of things happening in terms of Prisma and the pre-rendering, but that's like way out of the scope of an introduction of like trying to talk about the type of stuff I want to talk about. So we're not really going to get into all that, but there's like a ton of material out there if you're interested in that. So let's just get our dev server going. Let me move this down here. So all of our commands are going to start with yarn rw, and that's just short for Redwood. And then dev is to kick off our development server. And so if you see this right here, this is our hello world splash page, localhost 8910. So it's kind of nice, easy to remember. And this is like how you just start out a blank Redwood application. So as I said, everything you're going to see is going to be totally from scratch. And let me just get my screen situated. So I'm going to have all that over there and this guy right here. There's a lot of CLI commands that are going to kind of define a lot of the workflow with Redwood. So for someone who has used other things that have like a pretty involved CLI, then Redwood is going to be pretty nice and familiar to you. This first command is, so as I said, they all start with yarn Redwood, and then generate. We can actually shorten that to just the letter G if we want as well, but you're going to use the generate command a lot, and you're going to generate something specific. And what we're generating this time is we're generating a page, and that page that we're generating is going to be named home, and that home page is going to go to our just home route, like /. So if we're on ajcwebdev.com, be ajcwebdev.com/. That's your home page. And then we're going to get that guy going. And this is going to generate a couple things for us. And then we see how we have the automatic reloading on the right. This is our home page that was just generated. And this is our web folder that I was talking about. So we have our web folder, we have our API folder. Inside our web folder, we have pages, layouts, and components. So we just generated this page right here, this home page. And we can actually see that we inserted the word home into all these places. So we're going to generate another page later that's going to be different for all those. But right now, if we just check this out, and we're going to make that say async. And so we see now we got this over here. So if you have ever done React before, then this should look pretty familiar. Otherwise, it might look pretty strange, but this is just a React component. So we have a homepage component, which is arrow function that is returning this h1, hello async, and this p paragraph tag. So we are over here. So that's pretty nice. So we are just getting all this page routing stuff kind of out of the box. And the reason why is because we have this routes file over here. Now Redwood has its own router. So this is kind of a big piece of a lot of these frameworks that are around today, like Next or Nuxt. The router layer is what kind of like, to me, separates it from something like a Create React app, which doesn't have a router, or some just like using the Vue CLI just by itself. You don't really know. You can bring in the Vue router fairly easily, but you need to bring in the Vue router. So here we have two routes. Our route to the one we just created. So we see their homepage is set to page, which is this guy. And then we gave it a name when we typed the command, and that name was home. And then that was the path we did. So if we do this again, we're going to this time generate an about page instead of a home page. It's almost the exact same thing. Yarn Redwood generate page, but instead of a home page, it's an about page. And then we're not going to specify a path at all because we want the path to just be about. We want it to be exactly the same. So when we run this command, you're going to see the route change there. So we inserted the about page, the about name, and the about path. And then we also created this about page over here, and there's our about page. So you get the routing pretty much automatically. And then we're going to go ahead and edit this guy right here. And so now we got our about page. Another thing you'll commonly see in these types of front end, what I call meta frameworks, is layouts. Another common pattern you'll see. So a layout is just going to be something that's going to wrap your pages, right? So if you want header or footer or anything like that, so we're doing almost the same command again, but instead of generating a page, we're generating a layout this time. And that layout is going to be called blog layout. So let's close up our pages here. And in our layouts, we now have this blog layout. Oh, and also I should point out real quick. So there's also these other things going on here. So if you don't know what Storybook is it's a really cool tool that lets you kind of like see your components, like just kind of step through all the different states your component can be in, like a really nice visual way. If we have time, I might show a little bit of that. And then we have testing, which is just like your basic, tests. So no one likes them, but you got to do them, right? And let's go ahead and grab this blog layout here. So this blog layout is going to have nav, and that nav is going to have a link to our about page. So we got, let's close this guy. There we go. Okay. So this is our blog layout. We are bringing in the children, which is going to be the page. So whatever your page is going to come out here in main. And then we're going to have this header on top. So when we switch between our different pages, the header is going to stay put because we want to be able to navigate between our different pages. So right now we created this, but if we save it, like we're not going to see anything. There's nothing happening here. And the reason why is because this is a component. Everything is a component. So we have to import this component into the page that we want to use it. So we're going to go to our home page. That's such a weird thing GitHub does. Okay, so we're going to go to our home page. And so now what we're doing is we're importing our blog layout. And you'll also notice here how we're not doing any of this relative routing to get to our directory. We're just saying the exact directory we want, and Redwood does the mapping for you. And then we wrap the content in the blog layout. So now if we save this, we are going to see that over there. So now we have that layout, which is wrapping this woot, and that layout has these links. But if we go to our about page, then we don't see the layout anymore because we haven't imported the layout into our about page. So we're going to go ahead and import that guy and change it to blog layout. And then now we can actually switch between our two pages. Cool. So that's kind of your whole front end deal that's going on. And then now we're going to get into the Prisma stuff. So Prisma is an ORM, and it's going to do like our SQL for us is pretty much the simplest, most basic way to put it. Because actually it just like literally it writes SQL for you, it spits out a SQL file. So it's actually pretty easy to see what it's doing in that respect. And you can see here, you can set it to some different databases. I'm going to set it to Postgres. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up a database over here on the site called railway.app. There's actually a lot of companies right now that are doing this kind of like spin up a free Postgres database in like 5 seconds. There's like, I can think of like at least 3 or 4 companies that are doing this right now. So this is one of them. It's awesome. So you just go and you create a Postgres database. So you provision your Postgres. And this stuff is hilarious down here. They have one joke. They're like just calculating whether P equals NP or not. And then you go over here to PostgreSQL and then connect. So here's your database URL. So if you have ever used Heroku, you go in the Heroku dashboard, you would spin up a Heroku Postgres database, and you'd go and you grab your environment variables. This is exactly what this is. I tear down these databases afterwards because you don't want to expose this key to the world. But for now, just kind of demonstrate what's going on. We're just going to grab this sucker and put it in our environment. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to do, we're going to take this and we're going to rename it to just .env. And we already have our get ignore set to ignore our .env, which is a nice default that everyone should have. And now we can actually set our database URL. So you want to delete that part right there. So now it's this database URL is going to be set to this database, this connection string that we just got over here. And the way that Prisma knows what to do with this is because over here, we have this URL, which is set to our environment variable, which is called database URL. So this is just going to be a post because we're building a blog. A blog is actually not a very good example of like what you would actually want to build with Redwood. It's more like for dashboard, data intensive kind of applications, but a blog is very easy to understand. So a blog is a good way to teach Redwood, but this is all we're creating, a post that's going to have an ID. That's going to be an auto incrementing editor, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And then title and body, which are both going to be just strings, text. And then create app, which is going to be the date. And it's going to set that to now. So right now. And now that we got all that set up, here's where the real fun starts. So now we're going to do some Prisma migrate commands. And then let me make sure, PostgreSQL. So Prisma migrate is what's actually going to do the database migration for us. And this is hot off the presses. So we're doing yarn redwood prisma migrate dev. And this is going to set up our whole database for us. So you see right here, it's US East, US West 2. So you can actually see where your database's AWS location is. And we're going to call this migration async. And this will generate a migration over here. And if we see this, like I said, it literally just wrote SQL for you. It's actually just a .SQL file. So it's a create table, post, ID, title, body, create app. But what's really cool about this is actually it knows different SQL. So if I did this with SQLite, it would spit out slightly different SQL because like all SQL is not the same. This is kind of a double-edged sword because it also then means if you're going to develop locally on SQLite and deploy to Heroku Post or to any kind of Postgres, there's like weird things that might kind of happen. So I've kind of changed our workflow to where I just start with a Postgres database and it kind of minimizes any of that weirdness. But you also have this migration lock, which kind of if you start with SQLite and try and change it to Postgres, you get some weirdness with this migration.lock. And so this is stuff that wasn't in Redwood until like a couple of weeks ago. So that's why I say this is kind of like super fresh. But this is the way to go. Like this is much, much, much better than what we were doing. So like once you get the kinks ironed out, this is going to be like the sickest workflow ever. So now that we got all of that going, we're actually going to do the magic command. So when people talk about magic in frameworks, that basically means like someone wrote a crap ton of code that I didn't, and I may or may not understand it. But this is just going to basically create our entire blog interface for us, like the entire blog interface. So if you've ever seen the Rails demo, then you've probably seen something kind of like this. So just generated all that stuff. So don't even worry about that. We're just going to go over here and we're going to go to our post route. And we need to restart our server.
And now that that is going, then we can go to our posts route. I got it. And then we hit create one. So this is where we can create databases. And we're going to say, hello, async, Prisma, nailed it. So that is now, we're basically going straight into our database. And if we wanted to, we could edit this. And we could say Prisma nailed it again. And then we see it got edited. And if we want to create a post, then we can do that. And if we say delete, it'll say, are you sure you want to delete this post? And then there you go, post deleted. Just create a couple more of these. Just so we have some on screen. And now what we want to do is we want to do our data fetching from the backend to the front end, or the front end to the backend, whichever way you want to think about it. So we're going to do a GraphQL request to get these blog posts and just display them on our homepage. And the way we're going to do that is with something called a cell. And a cell is just a nice Redwood convention for making your data fetching declarative. And I'll explain kind of what that means once we actually see the cell. So we're going to do, again, a yarn Redwood generate command, but we're going to generate a cell instead of a layout or a page. And that cell will be called blog posts because it is multiple posts we will be querying, not a single post. So the naming of whether something is a post or posts is really important in terms of specifying what it's kind of doing. And let's close all these guys up. So we saw our layouts folder. We saw pages. Now we're in components. And this is the blog post cell. Now what we're looking at here is a GraphQL query at top, and then these 4 states that our data could be in. It could be loading if we're waiting for the data still. It could be empty if there's no posts in the database. It could be a failure if we get an error, in which case it says, hey, here's your error message. And then success, which just gives you the thing we queried for. Now, if you notice right now, it's saying cannot query field blog posts on type query. Did you mean posts, GraphQL validation? This is because we have a schema already. So if we look over here at our posts.sdl.js, this is our GraphQL schema. So if you've ever done GraphQL before, this should look super obvious. If you've never seen GraphQL before, it might look a little weird, but it's actually pretty intuitive. We're defining our post, which has an ID, title, body, and create at. And then we're saying we want to do a query to get our posts. And we're going to name that query just posts. And what that query is going to give us is going to be an array. So those are brackets of these post objects. And if I want just a single post, I would give you the ID of that post, and you would give me that post. And then this is how you do all the mutations as well, which is a little out of the scope of this talk. So that's all good. So let's go back to this and change that to posts, and that to posts, and that to posts. Now we have our cell. It's good to go. Just like a layout, just like anything else, it's a component. So we're going to import it onto our home page. Homepage. And then here, we're going to grab these guys. So we're importing the blog post cell from our components folder, and we're just putting that tag right there. Okay, let's get this guy over here. Okay, over there. Okay. So now we're going to see only the ID over here. And the reason for that is because we're only asking for the ID in our query. So if we also wanted to get the title, and so that gets this title now, say we also want the body, and then we also want the created at date time. So now we're getting everything, and we want to make it look a little nicer. So we're gonna go ahead and do this little component right here. So what's nice about this is these defaults are just going to work. You can create a nice loading spinner or some kind of funny empty error message, but really you can almost leave these things alone if you're strapped for time and just write the success. You write the query and then you write the success, and that's your whole workflow right there. So right now we're only getting the title, so we just see the titles right now. But if we want to get everything, we're going to also grab. That's too much. we also want to grab the created at and the body. So now we're bringing everything. And so now we see we got these blog posts. All right, just got a couple more things and we'll be done. So now we're going to set up our deployment with Netlify. And this is going to create a netlify.toml file. So the netlify.toml is what tells you how to do your build commands and where to publish your stuff and how to do your functions. So if none of that makes sense, don't worry about it. It's all kind of Jamstacky stuff. It's kind of like how your actual project ends up built and deployed to the CDN, because we're building this thing on our computers, but it's going to be a thing that's going to be generated and put on computers all around the world. So that's kind of the whole point of the Jamstack. So the way to do that is we're going to put it on Git repo, and then we're going to attach Netlify to that Git repo. And I need to create a Git repo first. So we're going to we're going to call this Async Redwood. I'm going to create that guy. And then we're just going to set the remote origin over here. It's all according to plan. Push to main. So here's our project now on this Git repo. So next thing is going to be Netlify. And everything I'm going to be showing you, including the railway thing from before, is like all on the free tier. So it's really great to get spun up with and start like building stuff. And then you can kind of like start to upgrade at a certain point if you want more sophisticated like analytics and stuff like that. And then here we're going to set the database URL. So I'm going to go back and grab that guy right here. And then we're going to go ahead and deploy. So this will take a minute or two. So if people have questions while this is going, this is the time to hit me with them.
Oh, any questions?
Yeah, I guess I've got a question. I'm quite familiar with the Rails way of doing things. This looks like it's ported a lot of the same ideas. Why GraphQL, since it seems to be so restful, what you're doing in terms of posts and stuff? What's the point of having a GraphQL layer in the middle?
Yeah, this gets at the whole history of the framework. So Tom and Peter created it together. Tom has been tuning Rails for like 15 years. He built GitHub with Rails. He's built one of the largest Rails applications of all time. So Redwood was built by long-term Rails developers. And also Tom's friend Rob is like, a Rails diehard. So the Rails influence is like pretty obvious. So what happened is they got into React, and they had a language learning platform called Chatterbug, where they were having a React front end speak GraphQL to a Rails backend, because they wanted the React stuff, but they couldn't get it to work well, really, with Rails. And then GraphQL got them kind of halfway there, but at the same time, they had to fully buy into GraphQL to really get the thing you want. Because GraphQL is the mediating layer between everything, your front and your back end. Like, we're making GraphQL calls directly into our back end. So it's a whole different way to kind of think about it. But you're right that it's very restful in that sense. But like, we don't want to give up the things that are good about REST. You want to give up the things that suck about REST. It's like creating a million endpoints,
Right. Okay. So yeah.
And then just kind of like another historical bit is that React and GraphQL grew up together in Facebook, So they're not technically coupled in the sense that they're two completely separate libraries. I mean, one's a spec, not GraphQL is a spec, not really a library, but they were made to fit each other. Like it is the same with Flux and same with Relay. Like all these kind of React, all these kind of Facebook open source projects are all released piecemeal. We're all pieces that made up Facebook, So once they were all released to the world, everyone kind of had to figure out how to piece them back together into something useful. So that's kind of how I see Redwood fitting into that whole story. So now we're gonna see our posts there. And since we were developing with our database, I was in production, we see our posts already there. Usually we start off with a brand new database at this point. But so if we do that, and we do that, And we do this guy and that guy. And we got a new post, which is gonna be there. All right, that's the whole demo.
That's really impressive. Cool. Thanks very much, Anthony.